On today's More Than a Test, I have David Miyashiro. He is a superintendent of Cajon School District in California. And you don't want to miss this conversation. David is one of those really cool people who his life story is a lot about cool experiences, a unique pathway, being open to the doors that open, walking through them and deciding, hey, maybe that's not the one for me, or maybe it is. And he's applied that to his schools and to the curriculum they've built for their schools. Where really helping kids find out their identity, what kind of vocations are included and inspired by their identity, and how they can really turn that into loving school, learning at school, and learning for the future. He's one of those people we all look up to for a lot of really good reasons. And I also would be remiss if I didn't say you cannot miss the Brady Bunch story. So please join us today on More Than a Test. Dr. Miyashiro, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Laura. Please call me David.
I sure will. I'm actually really impressed that you made time today because I know I'm about to get off this call, get on a plane and head to San Diego. You're going to be heading to San Diego for ASU GSB. And if I remember correctly, you're taking some teachers with you, right?
We have almost 300 registered and hoping for more. They'll be at the air show. And then we have our school tours where 300 plus of the ASU GSB conference will be coming through our classrooms on Monday. So it's a very busy weekend. Yeah, it's a 7-day work week this week for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're hosting some of the summit's school visits. So people are going to be going through your schools. And then also you're taking your teachers down there. Tell me, why is that worth the investment of 300 teachers at the ASU GSB Air Show?
I attended a panel with some CHROs from local Fortune 500 companies, and they were all talking about how they were approaching generative AI in the corporate world. And a couple of them were looking at downsizing and automation and, cost savings. But two of the companies shared, we're looking at this as an opportunity to raise awareness of generative AI for our employees, not just for work, but their personal lives. How can they improve their personal lives and their work lives? And how can we all be more efficient? And I thought that was profound. And that's exactly what we should do. So we're going to bring as many people as we can to as many opportunities at this early learning phase of this new technology and talk about it in a group thing kind of setting so that we can all be part of the decision-making process of what that looks like in our schools.
Okay, you sound really energetic about generative AI. I love that you brought up the personal piece. As someone who has used it to help me pack for trips and make all kinds of plans for my children, or even just we have a pre-K thing happening in Colorado that's kind of hard and confusing. There's lots of websites about it. And so getting it to get me to the best places on the pre-K, it totally makes sense to me. But every time I talk to people, they say teachers are worried about it. Teachers want ChatGPT banned, all that kind of stuff. Are your teachers different? Are your teachers more open-minded, or is our perception wrong?
Our teachers started using it at the moment it was released. And so knowing that certain people had access and others didn't was one of the concerns. So how do we make sure that everyone has equal access and opportunity? Of course, there are concerns about bad usage, but it's not about the technology. That's about intent. Right. And Richard Collada from ISTE talks about, if people are going to produce bad content, they're going to do it regardless of whether it's AI or not. It's about intention. So if you believe that people have good intention and you create the opportunity for positive work, then I don't see those concerns really being anything that we have to worry about, other than the cybersecurity, data privacy, and data security, which we already have locked up.
Awesome. So let's talk about those schools that people are going to be walking through this weekend. When these leaders come to your district, which is a big deal, right? To have them, getting to go behind the curtains, what are they going to see?
They're going to see Cajon Valley's modern curriculum. So all of our students start learning to give TED Talks starting in kindergarten, to tell their story, to build a sense of community in the classroom. We created a curriculum back in 2016 called The World of Work, which is the only K-12 comprehensive career development curriculum that builds vocational identity in the world. And then computer science and one-to-one and all the other modern technologies that enable the digital curriculum to exist. And we've been hosting school tours for ASU GSB for the last 7 years.
Okay, now I have a bunch of questions. Tell me one of the best things you've heard a kid say in their personal TED Talk. I put you on the spot.
There's so many, but one of the most recent TED Talks was from a student that when she was in 4th grade was new to the country from Iraq, and she gave a TED Talk with emerging English skills and talked about a safe place for herself and her family and how she feels welcome at school in a very diverse community. And Banosha gave a TED Talk last year. She's now a junior at our high school, talking about when she was in fourth grade and how the curriculum with TED and World of Work have given her aspirations for the future and how she knows exactly what she's going to do in pharmaceuticals and skincare. It's
Int-
it's it's so laser-like focused based on all of her life experience and her vocational identity. And to hear our scholars talking about their future, it's really exciting.
I can't imagine just how powerful having those stories kind of evolve as they grow older and like how beautiful that must be. I have 4-year-old twins and like we're constantly recording the silly things they say, mostly because we know eventually like they will be able to pronounce the word and we won't have it anymore. But then to also have like their hopes and dreams kind of given out, like that's really lovely. You keep saying two words that I haven't heard a ton. I know I've heard something like it, but I love the way it's so distinct. Vocational identity to your district and to you. What does that mean?
That means that we don't assume that kids are going to have the life experiences that their affluent peers will have in other districts in terms of conversations with adults, opportunities to go to companies like SDG&E and Qualcomm and Cox and meet with corporate executives. So one of my colleagues, Ed Hidalgo, said kids can't aspire to careers they don't know exist. And research from the UK on early career development shows that kids foreclose on careers as early as 7 years old. So if we don't intentionally put career exploration and connectivity to businesses and opportunities in our kids' hand, then we're going to lose the opportunity. So every grade, every year, starting in kindergarten, kids explore careers across the spectrum. We use the RISEC framework, John Holland's work,
Wow.
and they reflect at the end of each school year, these careers are most like me, these careers are least like me. And they build a vocational language, the RISEC, about their typology, their interests, and where their interests can actually take them. And so vocational identity, vocational and occupational identity is something that we build in our kids because we don't take for granted that they're going to have life experiences that'll expose them to those things.
Wow, that's incredible. And this is all part of your curriculum. Tell me a little bit more about your curriculum.
Yeah, so our modern curriculum started with computer science. When I first started as superintendent 12 years ago, I thought every kid should learn to code and they'll all be computer scientists because that's where the job market's going to be. And learned that at Qualcomm that Ed Hidalgo, who was there, who then came to be our chief innovation officer, said, I am counseling engineers out of their jobs because they're miserable. And so don't build computer scientists. Bring your kids to Qualcomm. And he showed them the world of work there. And he talked to our kids. He said, you have strengths, interests, and values. Some of them will lead you to the technical engineering side, but we also have an HR department. We have marketing, advertisement, and design if you like art. We have a culinary program that feeds our employees if you like, food and preparation. We have, health and wellness committees. So there's jobs for every type of person at Qualcomm, not just engineers. And that's where we said we have to hire ed and build a world of work curriculum around this idea of strength, interest, and values and expose kids to the whole opportunity spectrum in San Diego, including our military. We have a huge Marine and Navy base here.
Wow.
With civilian and non-civilian jobs that are great opportunities for our kids, some right out of high school. And a lot of the skilled labor, they told us, give us your kids in high school as apprentices, we'll hire them right out, and we'll pay for their post-secondary education because they're struggling to find their workforce. I think across the country, around the world, there's just a huge gap between open jobs and skilled labor. And so that's what we're trying to solve for here.
It's such a timely conversation because yesterday I was on a webinar with Nell Duke, who has her own curriculum. It's called Great Before 8. It's open source. But so a lot of her research has said part of the problem with curriculum, that's two big issues. One, teachers are juggling 9 different curricula at any time. And then 2, there isn't enough of a connection between different grade levels. And she talks a lot about pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade, where like kindergarten is all play-based or pre-K is, and then they get to first grade and all of a sudden recess is totally gone, right? And so there's not like the systematic like flow between them. Does your curricula address either of those concerns?
Yeah, one of the things that we heard from our teachers early on was engagement because of the relevance, but it's fun. The career explorations were designed from a project-based learning framework. So it's all hands-on and activity-based with lots of video and interaction as well. The other thing is our special education department said finally something for our kids to start thinking about their future. Yeah, IEPs are sometimes written around just specific academic goals,
Right.
but a lot of these kids who may not have 1600s on the SATs, what are they going to do after high school? This curriculum is for every kid, regardless of their background, their ethnicity, their gender. It's for everybody to find their path to economic mobility and financial freedom. And that's at the end game. That's what we want for our community.
That's really incredible. And now I'm assuming it's expanded beyond your district, right? Like this was built in house, but do other school districts use it?
We have a large group of Pennsylvania school districts, Indiana
Just
school
like
districts.
all the way on the other side of the country.
Yeah, we had our first World of Work summit that brought 500 education and thought leaders from all over the country to see firsthand and participate in the conversation. And we've actually licensed and copyrighted and branded our curriculum, and it's
Okay.
being sold through Beable, which is a literacy platform that merges literacy plus career development plus vocational identity plus SAT and SAT prep all in one platform.
Okay, so this curriculum is what you're probably most known for. When I ask people about you, they often talk about this as something that you've spread across the country. But you also have pushed the boundaries and done really innovative things in other ways. And I was telling you that I met a superintendent from New York, a small district in New York, and I asked him if he knew anything about you. And he said, yeah, when California told him he couldn't have a high school, he went and built a charter school. And so I'm just curious, have you always been like this, just kind of pushing the boundaries? And second of all, I'd love for you to tell this the story of the high school.
I think I've always bucked against the system and questioned things, which made me an awful elementary school teacher because you don't want your elementary school teachers questioning everything the principal does. But at one point, we were complaining about California's bureaucracy and some of the state policies and focus on standardized testing. And it dawned on us that we don't need their permission to do vocational identity. We don't need their permission to teach our kids to learn TED Talks. All we need is the support of our labor union and our school board. And we have a progressive and supportive teachers union that led the world in reopening their schools. And we also have a school board that sees common sense and economic mobility as a good goal for our district. So with those two entities, labor unions, school boards, you really can do anything. And because we have that environment, risk taking is something that is expected. And when we see a need to do something, we don't ask for permission, we just do it. And so the high school was just a natural evolution. You are K through 8. There's a gap between K through 8 and workforce, and high school is the thing that we tackled. And Tom Vander Ark and his team helped us design with Big Picture Learning, Bostonio Global, and that's one of the focuses of the ASU GSV tours on Monday.
Wow, that's incredible. It's interesting because anytime I talk to a superintendent in California, their union is going to come up at some point, right? It's just part of the deal. And the swing is either it's a lot of work or it's my freedom. Tell me what you've done to build a relationship with your union to let it be part of your freedom.
One of the things that I think both labor unions, we have certificated teachers and classified everybody else that works in the school district, is when we got together when I first started 12 years ago, we looked at how can we make work better? How can we make our work environment more Google-ish, right? Where employees have freedom and they have fun and they're supported. And most of the best Fortune 50 companies, they spend money on culture. And so we've taken a lot of time to understand what our teachers and classified staff want and need. We ask questions like, what are things you spend money on at work that you wish the district paid for? And then we deliver on that. But we've created a culture where employees are the first customers. And I think Southwest and Starbucks and In-N-Out Burger and Nordstrom's, they'll say the same thing. They treat their employees as their first customers so that they can be the brand ambassadors of the company. That's how we've approached our school district. And our Gallup scores started at 3-1. Now they're at 10-1 in terms of employee engagement and satisfaction. And when you have that type of culture, employees will show up and do what the district wants to do because we're all aligned with mission, vision, and the promises that'll get us there.
When you came in and started doing these surveys and started really learning from teachers, did they ever tell anything that really surprised you?
Oh yeah, it was awful. The data was horrible. it was, and they used to say, what does the district want us to do? And the district is doing that. Well, who is the district? The district is me. It's our assistant superintendents. It's you. What do we want to do? And it took several years to build the trust where they understood that when we ask questions, we actually care about the answers and we're going to listen to their feedback. One of the Gallup questions that education institutions and schools score poorly on is, at work, my opinions seem to count.
Right.
And it's true. I think most school districts don't ask the end users, the students and teachers and families, what do you think? What do you think we should do? And what would make things better? And then if you can ask the question, you better deliver on the response.
Yeah. So when teachers were telling you that there was something that like they were paying for that they wish the district would, what was something they were paying for that you now deliver?
Candy. And we said, we talked about it. We shouldn't be giving them candy. And I said, they're going to do it anyways. Let's just let them, have a candy budget. Fine. Fidget spinners and toys for their treasure boxes. Film developing for primary school teachers so that they could put pictures of their kids next to the bulletin boards. And we paid for Teachers Pay Teachers. We bought a district-wide license to Teachers Pay Teachers so that they didn't have to pay for additional curriculum supports.
It's funny because I'm sure that budget wasn't huge for you, but it meant a lot to the teachers that you listened, right? That you were willing to say, whatever, if they're going to buy the candy anyways, let's at least make it easy on them. And I think that's really, really powerful. I love talking about your district and I could do it all day long. And I wish I was getting to go on one of those school visits, but I'm not. But I would love to know a little bit about you. And so I have to know, like, your vocational identity. At 7, did you know you wanted to be a superintendent?
At 7, I wanted to be a dentist because there's a show called The Brady Bunch where Marsha Brady fell in love with a dentist in one episode. And I thought, that's going to be an amazing career.
Okay. So Marsha Brady fell in love with a dentist. So you were going to become a dentist. Do you think those surveys that you're using with kids suss that out? Like they find out that the Marsha Brady effect, or is it more about who you really are?
Well, that's what it is. I mean, there's nobody in my school, in my entire education, that talked to me about careers until I was out of high school.
Wow.
And I think that's the case with a lot of people. So what we do is very intentional. But so I actually was able to do in high school a part-time job working for an orthodontist as an orthodontist assistant. And one thing I learned is I have poor fine motor skills, no patience, and don't like to be in confined spaces. And so I hated that job, which led me to think I probably shouldn't go to dental school, right? And then, yeah.
Well, so okay, so you didn't end up being Marsha Brady's husband. You found out you shouldn't be in dental school. How did you end up in schools generally?
Well, and then in high school, aside from chasing girls and being the captain of the wrestling team, I was pretty good at performing arts and public speaking. And so I did ASB and, did theater at school. So I went to Long Beach State as a theater and performing arts major, and trying out for shows in the 80s and 90s at, local universities, there were no Asian roles. And so I didn't get anything. And one of the professors said, if you want to make money as an adult, you should probably quit this major because there'll never be Asians on television. And at the time, Connie Chung was the only, token broadcaster. I'm dating myself, but he was right. And there was this kid on Raiders of the Lost Ark that got a role with Indiana Jones, QB Kwan, who's now very successful. But I took that advice and didn't know what to do with it. And my mom was a teacher, and I would spend my afternoons in her classrooms doing my homework. And she said, why don't you be a substitute teacher? And then so I signed up, ended up getting a credential, and frustrated my principals, every year that I was a teacher.
Wow. Okay. That's just such an incredible story. I can't even imagine what it would be like to have someone just basically tell you like your dreams are not possible for you. And it's also interesting to me that on a pretty regular basis, I have people on the show who will tell me like I was a little lost. Someone told me no. I had a professor on who's a researcher who didn't get tenure, and his mom was like, well, maybe you should go like do some research around children and reading. And that's where his like whole career came from. So you became a substitute teacher, and I'm assuming you bothered all of your principals because you bucked the system. Is that true?
Yes. I questioned everything.
Okay. I have to tell you one of my favorite stories. When I was a teacher at a very popular charter school. I asked too many questions. My principal told me I asked too many questions, and we had to have like a quote outside of our door that I hated the quote that was given to me. And so I switched it to a quote from Catch 22 that was, gosh, what is the quote? It's something like, it is neither possible nor necessary to educate those who never question anything.
Oh.
And it's just like, it's so lovely to have a kindred spirit, I would say. So tell me a time that you took your principal for a ride with your questions.
Actually, every person that was over me in supervision until I became a superintendent was frustrated by me. But um, I just, when we wanted to have an after school program for sports, and I asked, could we have a budget for this? Like, why not? Like, I'm going to do it anyways. Our kids don't have access. I was a 100% Title I school,
Right.
and the opportunities that some of their affluent peers had, they didn't have. So I said, why can't we do this for our kids at school? Or why can't we do this? Or why are we using this curriculum when it sucks? Or like, why can't, back when I was an elementary teacher, we had this thing called whole language versus phonics.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the veteran teacher said, David, phonics works. But the principal was bringing in whole language, this holistic approach to reading where kids will just be immersed in space. And so I said, I'm going to listen to Rose and Nikki, who are 30-year veteran teachers, and they taught me how to teach reading, even though the principal said, we're moving in whole language. And she would come in my classroom and find evidence of phonics and phonics-based instruction. And I just argue with her, like, this stuff works. That's not going to work. And I questioned it. Like, principals didn't like that.
Yeah. So is that what happened? You were a teacher getting, teaching your phonics, getting questioned on everything. And you were like, well, I could probably do your job. Is that how you kind of worked your way up, or what happened next?
I actually left to lead Cal State Fullerton's online teacher credential program. It was at that early 2000s when technology was starting to come into higher ed, and they didn't have anyone with the technical expertise. So I got a job with Cal State Fullerton, did teacher professional development for a couple of years, consulted, and then went into administration and got my first principalship in 2003.
Great. And then from there became the superintendent?
And then took a low-performing Title I school out of program improvement in the early years of No Child Left Behind.
Wow.
Became known as a turnaround principal, got hired to do the same thing in another school in a nearby district. And what we saw was our kids were performing proficient and advanced on the standardized tests, but were still dropping out of high school, getting pregnant in high schools, going to generational gangs. So changing their test scores didn't change the life outcomes. And that's when it dawned on me that this whole No Child Left Behind may be well-intended and had some positive outcomes, but we weren't serving the community or giving our kids a better future. And that's when I was hired as an assistant superintendent to bring education technology into the district, saw the power of what one-to-one learning back in the early 2000s before, applications and before robust Wi-Fi. Just the creativity tools alone, watching our kids perform was incredible. And as an assistant superintendent, became a superintendent here about 12 years ago now.
You've been in the same district for 12 years?
No, I was in 5 different districts.
Okay.
Teaching in Roland, principal in Fullerton and Whittier, and LA and Orange County.
Okay.
Assistant superintendent in Encinitas, which is a very affluent North County coastal district here. And then Cajon Valley, which is the most beautifully diverse community in the whole world, I think, right here. Kind of.
Okay, let me just dial into a couple of things that you just said that I've heard. So the first is that this concept of No Child Left Behind and being well-intentioned. A superintendent recently told me that he stopped using state tests as his measurement and instead switched to ACT, SAT, and college acceptance rates or whatever, because that's really the goal, right? The goal is not to perform on the benchmark test for the state, but that this idea of what you get in the future is what matters. Have you done something similar where you're kind of measuring yourself as a little bit different?
Yeah, what we're excited about is the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, SERPI and the Walton Family Foundation, and the Prebys Foundation all have given us sizable grants to develop data systems, not just to measure what vocational identity and hope for their future is in K-12, but to follow kids post-secondary so that we can make sure that our kids are finding gainful employment. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is working on the Learner Employment Record, which is the same concept of building a data system that starts in primary school but follows adults so that we can make sure that the treatment in K-12 and post-secondary schools are actually manifesting themselves in the workforce.
It's funny when you were telling me that story about building the high school and you were like, "Hey, we had this gap between 8th grade and the workforce." I almost asked you, "Well, so what? Is it college next or is," and maybe not that, but this idea of you're even going beyond 12th grade to see where kids go and how are we really successful for them?
Yeah.
That's really great. Um, Something you said that also, so you said that you were is Encinitas the more wealthy and affluent district?
Hmm.
So a superintendent told me that it was really important to him that he moved around a bit because that's how you get ideas of what should be at the district you're at now. So if you see what the kids who have everything are getting, making sure that comes back to where you take it next. Is that something that's been valuable for you with all the moving?
Yeah, I think it was, most of my career has been spent in Title I schools. So going to Encinitas was a huge learning experience, but opportunity as well. In Title I, it's hard to get parents to come, right? It's like, just come show up for the conference, come, show up for the back to school night. In affluent communities, you can't get the parents out of the schools. Like with volunteer signups, there's 25 people on the wait list. It's like, which is actually, it's a wonderful opportunity to have parents in schools. But what I saw in my first year in Encinitas was the canned NCLB aligned curriculum our teachers were using in kindergarten to teach kids letters and sounds. The kids were already reading, but because of the pacing guide and the standards, they were teaching this is the L sound, the M sound, and the N sound today. And seeing what was happening was with almost malpractice because we're teaching kids things they already knew and not challenging them. When we asked the question of what if we use diagnostics to find out where the kids are and then personalized curriculum, that was a huge mind shift and a hard change. And I think in affluent communities, there's lots of false positives because kids have so many resources at home. They have parents that support them. They have parents that will give them tutors. They have parents that will hire, career coaches. And so it masks some of the insufficiencies, I think, that are in K-12 systems and very affluent areas. Um, that's my opinion. And so I think that innovation and personalization and using generative AI and these new tools, it's not just for low-income schools, it's for all schools. And we need to be able to look at different ways of measuring data or measuring performance, especially in affluent communities.
You're kind of pulling on a thread that anybody who listened to the Soul the Story podcast has heard, right? That this idea of whole language, the reason it got into so many schools is that affluent kids got tutors basically, and they were doing phonics somewhere else. And so it looked like kids were learning to read through this curriculum when in fact, they were just getting what they needed elsewhere. So I think you're really pulling on a thread. I listened to a video that you did with I think Google Classroom or something a little bit ago about personalized learning. This is kind of something that you've staked a lot of who you are on this idea of using technology for personalized learning. I think a lot of people say a lot of things about personalized learning and mean different things. When you say truly personalized a program, what does that look like?
In the early stages, when I was in Encinitas, personalized learning meant utilizing student data to personalize curriculum based on interest and also aptitude so that we can truly measure student growth, not just proficiency at a point in time. But now with the last 11 years of TED Ed and World of Work, it's more personalized on a lifelong path toward gainful employment, happiness, relationships, and financial freedom. And that's unique and it's different for every child. And it is going to require a new set of tools and data systems, which is what we're utilizing our current gifts and grants to build.
One of the things I recently read an article, I think it was on the 74, but it could have been on Ed Week about basically that assessments have really personalized assessments have fallen short. Basically, this idea of you know basically a kid click a button and then they go one way or the other, one of four ways, isn't really personalized. And at Amira, obviously, we believe that because our assessments are done on children's voices. But I know that you have some stuff about assessment. Tell me a little bit more about what you think we should be doing with generative AI to save teachers time and also have effective assessments.
Last year, I was at a conference called Joy Jam, hosted by my friend George Billhauer in Indiana in Eastern Hancock. And the keynote speaker, Jonathan Vanderels, his talk was on assessment. And he showed a slide where he showed the root word of assessment is asidir, and it means to sit beside. Assessment is literally to sit beside. When you think about anything that you've done in terms of your own life with sports or work or school, the most meaningful opportunities for growth have been in conversations with people sitting beside you. And I think assessment is that. It's coaching, it's development, it's relationships. And that's where I think the excitement of personalized learning technology and generative AI can free up time for those relationships and conversations actually to take place individually, so that every student has the opportunity to hear from multiple adults and peers about, how they're doing, what they're doing, and how to improve that. But I love that thought of assessment is to literally sit beside.
I'm so glad you shared that about assessment meaning to sit beside. I think it's the opposite of how most students feel about assessment right now. It doesn't mean that the future can't change, but definitely how they're feeling right now is it doesn't feel like tests are meant to be a moment of learning together with someone, or even showing someone what you know. Something else that I feel like you get asked about a lot that I would love for you to speak to is the future of education, and what do you think is coming next? When you think about what excites you about the future, what is most exciting right now?
This morning, I had a conversation with Claire from Indiana, who had taken a group of Indiana educators to an institute in Switzerland. And what they learned, she shared with me, was that 70+% of all Switzerland high school students starting their sophomore year are engaged in apprenticeships. And they have a curriculum similar to our World of Work, where kids have early career exposure and interest inventories to build a vocational identity, to make sure that their placement in their internships are aligned. And the companies play a huge role in that in Switzerland. They commit to not just hosting apprenticeships, but hiring them out of high school and helping continue their education. And they have a thriving workforce. Switzerland is one of the companies that's always in the top 5 in the happiness index worldwide. And I think that there's a lot we can learn outside of our own systems and even our own country. And I'm excited about attending that institute and learning how we can make sure that every high school student has apprenticeships, not just 1 year in senior year, but every year starting in freshman year, like we do at Bostonia Global.
Okay, if you could have one company that you currently do not have an apprenticeship with in your district, but you wish you did, what company would it be?
The Department of Defense.
Okay. Tell me
And
why.
I don't think that they host that. And the other one is our police department. So we've been able to place
Really?
interns in dispatch and in some aspects, but because of the nature of the work, other than a ride along, kids can't really apprentice as a police officer. So, but we are working with local public service industries to do that. But yeah, we'd love to
That's
work with
really
the
neat.
Navy and the Marines to get our kids to see. Yeah.
That's really great. My podcast producer does something with the Navy, so I'll let him know that you're interested. But it's crazy because I was expecting something fancy, right? I was expecting like, I don't know, Microsoft or Boeing or whatever, and you're like, nah, I just want us to be in with our local, the people who make our community thrive is where our kids want to be and find an interest. That's really great.
Yeah, one of the things that we've heard from our leaders in the Navy and Marines is that we stigmatize, public service and the Department of Defense. We don't show them that the military is a viable option. And they said, we don't want your dropouts and your people that are going to do that as a default. We want kids to aspire to serve their country, whether that be in combat or non-combat, because our freedom is dependent on our military, and we need to uplift and give them the light that they deserve.
That's incredible. Have you had an apprentice as the superintendent?
Actually, we have several. We have about, I think, 75 interns here at the district office in child nutrition, in transportation, at our schools with our teachers and counselors. And I don't personally have one, but we have 4 in our immediate office right here that are serving as personnel and media interns.
Okay, let me ask you one more question about you, and then I want to go to our 5 questions that we ask everybody. Something that you said, and I told you I connected to it, is that you buck the system. You always ask why. You always we're driving your bosses crazy, right, with your questions. What happens in your district now when a teacher asks why or bucks the system or wants to kind of push the boundaries? How does that work for you now that you're at the top of the pyramid?
Tell me more. And
Yeah.
it's that's the best thing that we can have, is people that have an idea or something that we're not thinking about. And we've created a culture where everyone can talk to everyone. Yesterday, or a couple days ago at COSIN, I was at a conference and I was talking to someone at a table, and she said, "I can talk to you. I can't even talk to my own superintendent because of the hierarchy." And I thought, that's awful. But yeah, we have a culture where we embrace questions and we want to hear ideas.
If you were going to give a leader advice on how to create that culture, whether they're a superintendent or an organization, if they really believe that they want to let people ask questions, but they're not there yet, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to partner with the Gallup organization, because not only does Gallup have the assessments on student, employee, and parent engagement, but it gives actionable tools when the data that you receive from the surveys are not very good. Okay, it's like, if you have a system where teachers don't feel their opinion counts, this is how you can engage them. This is how you would set up a meeting in a forum to gauge input. This is how you actively listen, and again, you better deliver based on the feedback that you get, or people are going to start answering your surveys. Stop answering your surveys.
I just saw Simon Sinek do something around like this idea of like people think about who they want to work with, and they have like trust and then like intelligence, right? Was like the Y and X axis. And he said, honestly, people would work with and for someone who is not as bright if they are more trustworthy, that they believe that what they say matters and that you're going to take the feedback is actually that like is so important. So to your point about like, if you're going to ask the question, you have to do something with it, I think is really important.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we have 5 questions. This has been a great conversation. And I know we could go all day, even just talking about the technology stuff that you've done in your district. So thanks for making time. But we have 5 questions we ask everybody. And the first one is, the podcast is called More Than a Test. At Amira, we call it More Than a Test, partially because of what we talked about, that we believe assessments should really be about individualized understanding and learning. But when you heard More Than a Test, what did you think of?
I thought, I want to talk to these people. And I'm glad that we did. Amira is a great platform. I look forward to learning more about the literacy approach and the personal AI tutor that you have built into the system.
Awesome.
Tomorrow, right, at the air show.
Yeah, I'll see you there. Although it sounds like you're going to be busy. Okay, and then the second question is, tell us about a lit moment in your life. And what we mean is a moment of you in a book that either changed you or is your happy place or something you think about often. So a moment of you in a book.
Fans First. The author is Jesse Cole. He is the owner and the general manager of the Savannah Bananas. And if you look at innovation from a baseball perspective, Major League Baseball changed some of the rules the last couple of years. Savannah Bananas revolutionized baseball. And it really isn't about the baseball story as it is the leadership story of how do you build a culture where you can actually change America's pastime in a way that amplifies the fan experience.
I have never heard of it, but I'm totally going to look it up. That sounds amazing. Okay. And before we go to the next question, I'm actually going to insert a question because I've been thinking about it and I was like, I don't know if I can ask it. So I'm going to ask a bonus question. Do you ever wish that you had continued on the acting path?
Actually, maybe it's not too late. I don't know.
Oh my God. I would love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. If you could be on any show, movie, what would you be in?
Gosh, I would love to be an anchor on Sports Center. That would be fun because I love sports and I love to talk about it. And then when I see the commentators, they look like they're having so much fun. And that looks like amazing. I'd also love to be Kelly Ripa's next partner. That'd be fun. It looks like she has fun with her co-host. And
I have no idea how you have time to know about Kelly Ripa, considering the amazing things that you do. And I love how many interests you have. This is so great. I'm glad I got brave enough to ask. All right, tell me about a piece of technology you love.
I love my MacBook Pro. That's pretty much my go-to.
Awesome.
And I'll share that. I'll be vulnerable here. In November, I got hearing aids as devices and didn't realize how much of the world I was missing out in terms of just being able to really hear all the conversations. So I'm grateful for these listening devices and have learned a lot about brain development and early onset for those who don't have acute hearing. So I highly recommend getting your hearing checked.
I'm so glad you shared that. I have a good friend who's in his 30s and just got hearing aids. And, the same story of like early onset for, brain and memory stuff. And I think it's really important. And so I'm so glad. I'm glad that you can hear me. That's awesome. Okay. The best advice you've ever been given.
The 4 rules I live by, which I hope everybody lives by, is 1, to always be kind. But 2, always tell the truth. 3, when you make a mistake, apologize for it. And the last one is do what you say you're going to do. Follow through, keep your word. And if you can always do those things, then I think that you'll be a happy person.
Yeah, that's really great. It's simple and it's things we've all heard like separately, but it's nice to have them in one place, especially when you're in your hard moment. I could see you like going back and like going through my checklist. It's like, is this the truth? Is this kind? I love that. And one book you think everyone should read?
Well, Fans First was one, but the other one is Excellence Wins. It's by Horace Schultz, and it describes how he built the Ritz Carlton industry. He actually was a consultant for us for 2 years, and we had one-on-ones with Horace talking about how he was able to create a culture where no matter what employee it was, groundskeeper, cook, server, they would treat their guests like royalty. And so you can bet that when you go to Ritz Carlton, regardless of the employee, if you come within 6 feet, they're going to stop what they're doing, put it down and say, "Good morning. How are you today?" And they're going to care about the response. And I think that there's lots to be learned about his story and how he built the best hotel industry. What if our kids and our parents, when they showed up at our schools, felt like guests to the Ritz Carlton? Wouldn't that be amazing?
That is amazing. I love how many times in this conversation you kind of mentioned having consultants, having outside people help, listening to other voices. Tons of research has been mentioned. I just want to tell you how much it means to me as someone who's been in the classroom and definitely pointed have been like, the district is this, to hear someone who just really wants to learn and listen to their teachers and listen to every other voice to do the best thing possible for their schools. I can see why you have so many fans. I'm now a fan too. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks for joining us on the More Than a Test podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. At Amira Learning, we believe every child deserves a chance to become a reader, and we're excited to be part of this conversation. See you next week, and thanks for joining.